Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. I am Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso, and I am thrilled to announce the launch of my comprehensive plan for Brooklyn. I want to be clear that this document is in direct response to our city's failure to plan, because in New York City, we zone, but we do not plan. Whereas most major cities have a comprehensive plan to guide growth, we do not. Today, that changes in Brooklyn. The need for comprehensive planning has never been more apparent than it is right now. Just last week, we experienced torrential rain that flooded our streets and homes and brought New York City to a standstill. Over the past year, more than 100,000 migrants have arrived here, putting our local government into a tailspin as we struggle to accommodate the needs of our newest residents. These most recent challenges have both highlighted and exacerbated the decades of unpreparedness that have left major holes in our city's physical and social safety net infrastructure. Our city's failure to plan has also created deep inequities across our borough. We see these inequities first and foremost in housing. In Brooklyn, some neighborhoods get away with contributing no new affordable housing, while other neighborhoods do all the work. Between 2010 and 2020, Community District 1, which encompasses Greenpoint and Williamsburg, added 18,500 units of housing, while Community District 18, which encompasses Canarsie, Bergen Beach, Mill Basin, Flatlands, Marine Park, Georgetown, and Mill Island, only added 500 units. Through downzonings, historic districts, and political capital, the neighborhoods that are the wealthiest and most well-resourced are able to keep people out. In other neighborhoods, local electeds and residents are simply refusing to let new affordable housing stock into their communities, and our current process lets them get away with it. Over a 4-year period, Community District 5 constructed and preserved over 12,000 units of affordable housing. In CD10, that number is a meager 7 units. It is unconscionable that this is happening amid a profound housing crisis. And disparities are not just seen in housing. We see disparities in the fact that between parts of Park Slope and parts of Brownsville, life expectancy can differ by nearly a decade, and median household income varies by as much as $125,000. We see disparities in the fact that Black women are 9.4 times more likely to die of pregnancy-related complications than their white counterparts, and the fact that 90% of all childhood lead poisoning cases involve children of color. The patterns of inequities across our borough are easily visible, as are the impacts that they have on residents. These inequities and the poor outcomes that they lead to are not happenstance. They are the direct result of New York City's failure to plan. New York City has a myopic approach to quote-unquote planning that is disjointed across agencies and irreverent to the realities of how people move about and experience the city. For example, the DCP is not the only planning agency in New York City. The Department of Transportation, HPD, Small Business Services, and the Economic Development Corporation, and the mayor's office all do planning work too, but there is very little collaboration, poor information sharing, and no unifying vision or guiding principles. These agencies then use community district and council district boundaries to plan, despite these boundaries having little to do with how people use the city. So when Community Board 10 wants bike lanes, but Community Board 11 doesn't, we end up with 5 bike lanes that stop short at 14th Avenue. It's an entirely arbitrary border that has nothing to do with connectivity, nothing to do with street safety, and everything to do with politics. Piecemeal planning efforts like this are just not functional for a city the size of New York. And the resistance to real long-term comprehensive planning means our city is being shaped around the desires of real estate developers rather than the needs of New Yorkers. We see this clearly in the fact that the vast majority of applications that come out of DCP are private. It's a tacit admission of how our city works and who is running it. Because if zoning is the only mechanism we have right now to plan, the private actors are leading rezoning efforts. The result is a city designed not for the good of the public, but for the gains of the private sector. And because residential space is so much more lucrative than, say, manufacturing space, M districts are eroded and career pathway jobs are limited for those without advanced degrees who speak languages other than English are limited. The same goes for commercial uses, like in downtown Brooklyn, where the city intended for office use, but produced almost all residential units. And in this instance, the planning failure left the city scrambling to catch up because they don't plan for any of the infrastructure or services, like schools, that the influx of new residents require. When it comes to planning, our city falls short, and our communities have taken note. There is a deep-seated community distrust of city-led planning efforts, and I know this all too well. When I represented the 34th Council District, Councilmember Rafael Espinal and I went through a 5-year planning process for Bushwick and the city, with the city. Bushwick residents and stakeholders to address the neighborhood's outdated zoning and create a plan for how to meet residents' need. After all that time, all that work, the city didn't want to accept the Bushwick Community Plan because it didn't meet the expectations they had, no matter the fact that the city had never communicated what exactly those expectations were until the 11th hour. The whole thing ended up falling apart, and the result, the neighborhood still has the same outdated zoning, plus some deep, well-earned distrust of the city planning process. What it comes down to is the fact that our city's process puts politics and private gain before public good. Just look at the member deference and a council district like the 44th, where 3 applications for new development that would have included permanently affordable housing units have been pulled over the last year alone. Whether it's absorbing new immigrants or preparing New York against floods like last week's, we cannot afford to keep going on this way. Our city has been triaging New Yorkers' needs on a day-to-day basis. It's not sustainable. Apply the slightest bit of pressure, and we have the current situation: strained city services, a humanitarian crisis, and no plan forward. Updates to the zoning code are not a solution. We can tweak chapters here and there, when what we really need is an entirely different book. My comprehensive plan shows us what we could look like. It illustrates a new planning paradigm applied to Brooklyn. What does planning for the public good look like in Brooklyn? Our comprehensive plan balances community needs for housing, healthcare, employment, transportation, infrastructure, and more to ensure every new neighborhood can grow and thrive equitably. It clarifies local needs as well as citywide needs and sets expectations so that each community district plays a role in meeting the needs of the borough. It makes funding recommendations so that government's limited resources can make the greatest impact for those who need it the most. And it recognizes that all urban policy, budget, and land use decisions are inherently interrelated and therefore need a shared vision to guide them. Before we get into my vision for how to solve these inequities, I want to talk about what the plan is and what it is not. The plan is not a substitute for citywide comprehensive planning or for local planning efforts. It is not a rezoning proposal, and it's not something I can implement entirely on my own. What is it then? First and foremost, it is a guide for my land use recommendations and decision-making. It's a vision for equitable growth based on comprehensive analysis of conditions across the borough. It is a plan to address the dual crises of housing and public health through land use, policy, and budgetary recommendations. And last but not least, it is a proposal for a different way to manage the city. It's a model for planning citywide, and it's a chance for New Yorkers to see the planning that's possible, that they deserve, and that they should fight for citywide. The old way of doing things is not working, at least not for everybody. And if we're going to build a Brooklyn for all, this is how we'll do it. I'm not going to walk us through what exactly is in the comp plan, and then we'll go to questions. So I want to thank you for that. So the planning process was presented, was something that we talked about 7 years ago, even longer, and we now have an opportunity in Borough Hall to move it forward. So this is everything we've done. We released a white paper about creating a more equitable land use process in 2016, hosted a summit on reforming New York City's approach to development to improve public engagement with the RPA, Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer, and a working group formed in 2017. We released Inclusive City, Strategies to Achieve More Equitable and Predictable Land Use in New York City, which recommends citywide comprehensive planning. In 2019, we led the fight alongside then Councilmember Brad Lander to revise the city charter to include comprehensive planning. And then alongside Speaker Corey Johnson, introduced the bill to amend the city charter to require a comprehensive long-term plan. I speak to all this because this is something we've been working on for a long time. We've known it's been a problem, and it was a problem then, and it's still a problem now. So this is the process we took since February of 2022, 1 month after I came into office. These are the folks we worked with. We have an advisory committee. We haven't done this solely on our own. We have existing conditions report that was released originally through public workshops. We were able to really modify the existing conditions to really speak or be seen in a way that can easily be consumed by the general public. We had more public workshops. We had public surveys. We held briefings for stakeholders, the city planning or DCP and the city council. So it's been an extensive amount of work over the last year and a half. So these are the things that you're going to find inside. This document is not a 5-page document. It is a comprehensive plan, and this is us doing the best we can to condense it so that it's as consumable as possible. These are some examples of things you will see in the comprehensive plan. This is a map on existing conditions related to life expectancy. And this is where we give an example where in Brownsville, the average age is 76 years old, while in Park Slope and Carroll Gardens, the average age is 82.9 years old. And a lot of these conditions, a lot of the reasoning for this is based on the lack of planning and preparing for better health outcomes through planning. Housing unit change, and here you're going to be able to see who's building and who's not, which I think is deeply important. We right now do zoning in our city, not planning, zoning in our city that's hyper-local. So one community district can say that they don't want to build any housing, or one council member can say they don't want to build any housing, completely disregarding borough-wide and city-wide needs. And this map is just going to show folks at a larger scale who's doing the work and who's not. Medium household income. This is also important for us. Obviously, there are deep inequities when it comes to income in our city, and in here, it'll be made more apparent through visuals. So these are the goals, objectives, and recommendations. We have 7 goals related to health, housing, environment, active listening, community services, jobs, and accessibility. The 23 objectives towards achieving these goals, and over 200 recommendations organized into 4 categories based on the powers of the borough president. So it's what I can do. I can advocate, I have a budget, I'm able to make recommendations on land use, and I'm able to build through outreach. We have frameworks. The plan outlines the 4 frameworks that apply land use policy and budgetary recommendations spatially across the borough. So there are 4 land use frameworks that we applied and we use. And this is how we want to be able to use it. So moving forward in this office, it's going to be very predictable. What I do will be very transparent and to the best of our ability, devoid of all politics. We want to identify community needs, want to find information and data on Brooklyn, and to refine the future of planning in New York City is the ultimate goal. So again, the recommendations will be decision-making and effective immediately. I'll do the best I can to distinguish planning from politics and to articulate priorities to constituents, partners, and outside parties. And we're done. That is our presentation on comprehensive planning. I'm really looking forward to questions and answers. And I'm going to say something in Spanish very quickly. I'm going to do the best I can here. Let me keep this here. All right. Okay. En este momento, lo que estamos haciendo en Borough Hall, como el presidente del condado de Brooklyn, en este momento, esta ciudad no hace planificación, lo que hace es zonificación. Nosotros lo que queremos es asegurar que nosotros podemos planear para el futuro de Brooklyn y, si Dios quiera, el futuro de Nueva York. En este momento eso no está pasando y vemos la crisis que existe en este momento. Creemos que mucho, o la parte de esa crisis viene de la falta de una planificación comprensiva en nuestro condado y en nuestra ciudad. Nosotros queremos enseñar que podemos manejar la ciudad mucho mejor de lo que estamos en este momento con planificación. Y lo que está viendo hoy es ese plan que lo estamos soltando hoy. Esperemos que el público pueda leer ese plan, y si tienen recomendaciones o opiniones, por favor, dejarnos saber y nosotros continuar a asegurar que este plan sea fuerte. Muchas gracias. All right, so now questions. We open it up to the public, and we have our experts here. So I'll be doing the best I can with the limited expertise that I have. but we have folks that are more than ready, willing, and able to answer any questions related to comprehensive planning. So we open it up.